big question that is asked a lot, or a word that's thrown around with leadership, is influence. And obviously there are a lot of influencers, and it seems to be the number one choice of career now for children, young children, and our youth trying to. I know that makes me sound really old, doesn't it? The youth of today. No, but like, it's just, you speak to someone now, no longer do they want to be a fireman or a policeman or an astronaut. They want to be an influencer. And the question comes beg like, is an influencer a leader? Because influence and leadership are two words that are thrown around quite often together, but are they actually leadership? Are influencers leaders? And what we're going to do today is we're going to actually look at a number of different articles and things that have happened in the news over the last week or so, that we're going to focus on influencers over this episode, and look at a few things that they're doing and figure out, is that good leadership? Is it poor leadership? Is it leadership at all? And is there anything that we can learn, maybe in aspiration of becoming like having the influence that they do, or some lessons we can learn just to become better leaders? But I want to kind of address the concern of, is an influencer a leader? Yes. But I kind of want to preface this today with understanding that there are actually two types of leader. Well, actually, so many different categories, everything like that. But this was actually L is for leadership. The L. Oh, now I've forgotten. I should remember. I prepared before him. Now I've just blanked on his name. I will look it up, and I will let you know. But throughout this episode. But L is for leadership, and he speaks about one of my lecturers at university. So I'm trying to remember his name, but actually Dr. Rob might remember him as well. But he talks about there's kind of like these two styles of leadership. There's direct leadership and indirect leadership. And unfortunately, the indirect leadership, which is kind of that influencer, the person that's on TV, the person that's on stage, the person that's in the spotlight, they're an indirect leader because they're kind of influencing and leading from afar. And it is a form of leadership, but it's not leadership incomplete. It is incomplete. It's not complete leadership, because to be a true leader, we really need indirect leadership, which is inspiring and leading from the front and be attracting crowds and things like that. We need that. But we also need direct leadership. And this is where I believe, we're here on a mission to eradicate poor leadership. And where I believe poor leadership, the behavior of poor leadership comes, is that most people are tending towards wanting to be attracted towards being an influencer or an indirect leader, and they fail in the direct leadership. The direct leadership is the one-on-one, the mentoring, the helping, the actual helping people grow, the working with people, the discipleship, the true discipleship. If you look at Jesus, yes, he was an influencer because he spoke to large crowds, but he also was a direct leader because he used to lead the disciples and disciple them and teach them one-on-one, correct them and live with them and guide them. And I believe that that's the key. We need to really look at these today. Is like, yes, an influencer is a form of a leader, but I don't believe it's the complete picture of a leader. And part of what my ethos is that we need both. We need both the indirect and the direct leader to actually be successful in leadership. Now, if you don't actually have the indirect skill, but you're more of a direct leader, that's fine. You can partner with someone, because here's the thing, there are plenty of leaders out there that are incredible indirect leaders, but aren't that crash hot at direct leadership. Now, if you can both be humble enough to understand and admit that, yep, you know what, I'm not a great indirect leader, but I'm a great direct leader. And you know what? This person can say, yeah, I'm a great indirect leader, but I'm not that good at direct leadership. What if we partner and become a better team together Because like Paul writes in the Bible, we are many parts, one body, and we all need to find that way to work together. A little bit of a long way to kind of lead into introducing my partner, Dr. Rod St. Hill, someone who has been an incredible influence on my life. We nickname him the businessman's pastor because he really is pastor to business people, and he is that person for me that he brings a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience that I don't have, and I believe that we make a great team together. So Dr. Rod St. Hill, thank you and welcome once again.
Well, g'day.
So
That's what we say here in Australia. G'day.
G'day, mate. So tell me, Dr. Rod, I know we throw this around a lot, the word influence. It's thrown around a lot in leadership. What's your take on influence when it comes to leadership?
Well, every definition I've ever read of leadership includes the word influence. Mm-hmm. But it's more than influence. And I think you've alluded to that in your introduction, Craig. If you're just an influencer, then in my opinion, you're not a leader. Yep. Or at least if someone regards you as a leader, you are very much an incomplete leader, yes. Which I think was the terminology you used. Mm-hmm. I've tended not to think of leadership as direct and indirect, but I understand the model that you're working from. When you're talking about direct leadership, what it really boils down to is empowerment. Now, I think the difference between someone who is merely an influencer and a leader, it really hinges on empowerment. A good leader, what I would call a complete leader or a proper leader, not only influences those people around them towards some purpose, but also empowers those people to move towards that purpose. Leadership without purpose, of course, is not really leadership at all either. There has to be an end in mind. And I think that was what really set Jesus apart, because he definitely had an end in mind, and he definitely influenced people. But much of what we read in the Gospels is about Jesus empowering his disciples. And of course, in Matthew 28, where we see the Great Commission, he actually says, I'm going to be with you. So we have that assurance from him as well. So it worries me a lot that we think of social media influencers as leaders, because I don't think they are. One of the reasons is I don't see them empowering other people very often. And the other is it's not clear to me that they're heading us or they're leading us in the direction of a positive outcome. It has to be about human flourishing at the end of the day. So where an influencer is really just puffing up themselves and building their own empire, I don't see that as leadership, because it's not really contributing anything positive to human flourishing. And of course, if you're not careful in the way in which you define leaders, Adolf Hitler will turn out to be a good leader. He was certainly an influencer. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he drove towards an outcome. He attracted people around him.
And he was after an outcome, but you'd hardly call it an outcome that contributed positively to human flourishing. So I do think we've got to be very careful when we think about leadership. I know, John Maxwell's famous definition was that it's about influence and nothing more, nothing less. Yeah. In fact, I think that's a direct quote from his. Mm-hmm. Respectfully, I would say, nope. Yeah. That can actually lead us to give the label leader to people who are not actually either empowering people or bringing people to a point where there is actually positive contribution to human flourishing.
That's great. Okay, so I think that is actually the perfect segue into our topic today, because we're going to talk about a bunch of influences, and we can really look at, well, are these people actually helping the flourishing of people, right? Or are they just building their own brand? Are they just, what can we learn from leaders? There's some things here today that we can learn personally, but also I think that there's some practical marketing principles and things we can learn. But let's get straight into it. Let's talk about Logan Paul and KSI. Now, I don't know if you know anything about, Dr. Rod, do you know anything about Logan Paul? Have you ever heard of him before?
No, not really. But
Okay.
don't
Well,
forget, I'm an old man. I'm an old man.
see, this is why we're a good team. Like, there's some things that I'm good at. Some things that you're good at. You're good at bringing the wisdom, and we can really talk about you know, what's happening in the trends of culture. So Logan Paul and KSI are influencers. They're just YouTube stars, not just YouTube stars. They're probably some of the biggest YouTube stars. Logan Paul is become a YouTube kind of boxer, and he's made lots of money from fighting lots of people. On for YouTube and for pay-per-view and everything like that. He's done very well. He is the brother of Jake Paul, the very infamous. I think the right word is that he was a big prankster, big YouTuber, Viner early on, and he infamously went and made fun in a forest in Japan, which is called a suicide. It's where everyone goes to commit suicide. Like, it's a suicide forest, and he got a lot of backlash from that. And there's so it's been very interesting to see how Jake Paul has been able to rise through, with his Logan and his brother have been able to kind of claw back, try to create a name for themselves, and they've become this influence. They are some of the biggest influencers when it comes to social media nowadays. And Logan Paul has teamed up with a UK-based influencer called KSI, and they actually fought together. They boxed together in a pay-per-view, YouTuber versus YouTuber kind of fight, and got lots of views and stuff. And they hated each other, and they became friends. And then they started this business together, which is called Prime Energy Drink. And I think it's first of all, I really like to see when influencers, rather than just trying to make money off views, they actually go out and create a brand and create a business and create a product out of it. I think that's great. Like, I think it's good that they've been able to use their influence to then create a product. And this product that they've created has just created so much, like, it's just taken the world by storm. Everywhere they're going, people are, swarming them for this because of their fame, but also they're using their fame and their influence to promote this product, which is working really well for them. It's one of it's now taking on the big energy drink companies. Now, recently, it's become under fire a little bit because there's calls for it to be investigated by the FDA, the Federal Drug and Alcohol. Is that what?
No,
FDA?
administration, no. FDA, Federal Drug Administration.
That one. Where they make sure everything you consume is safe. Like, that's kind of what safe. Like, I use that in inverted commas with what they say, but there's been this issue because let me go down and find out. Okay, Prime Energy contains 200 milligrams of caffeine per 12 ounces, equal to 6 cans of Coca-Cola or nearly 2 Red Bulls, and they're saying that it's unsafe and everything like that. Now, to their, I mean, not that I want to defend them per se, but just to give context, they've got a number of drinks in their range. They've aimed towards like the Gatorade kind of drink market, but mixing between the Gatorade and the energy drink market. Sorry, the gym market, right? So their drinks are. There's a pre-workout, which is the one that has caffeine, and then there's post-workout, which is the one that's like Gatorade and stuff like that. So it's not like all of their drinks have that, but one of the drinks in their range is like a pre-workout. Now, to kind of give context, yes, if you compare it to Coca-Cola and Red Bull, it seems bad. But if you've ever had, Dr. Have you ever had a pre-workout?
No.
Okay. So, I'm just asking. Never know.
So you and I are different, aren't we?
Well, yeah, we are very different. But I don't drink coffee. I don't drink caffeine at all. But I know a lot of people. I obviously train in the gym, and I'm very, very conscious, health conscious. And I know a lot of people that are training in the gym. My wife, she loves using a pre-workout, and those pre-workouts are like scoops that you put into mix up to water, and they're just pretty much just may as well get the syringe out and inject your veins full of caffeine so you got energy to go to the gym. So those things have high high caffeine ratings anyway, like higher than Red Bulls and everything like that, because you take them at the gym, you're like, I'm ready to go, right? So take it for what it is. However, what I wanted to talk about in this is obviously these guys have built influence. But their influence is for a very young market. They actually have a very strong influence with underage, teen males. And I suppose my question to you, Dr. Rod, is I know that let's say that it's justified that this is for gym people, this is for people that work out and things like that. And what's your responsibility as an influencer if you're promoting a product that is not good for the most of your demographic?
Well, the thought that occurred to me was, who are they really marketing it to?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Are they really marketing to the young people who are their followers on social media? Now, if that's the case, I think it probably does raise some moral issues, but they're not different to the moral issues that arise in the production of anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
A drink full of sugar, a drink full of caffeine, most processed foods, the level of salt in processed foods and so on. I guess one of the issues with caffeine, of course, is it is a stimulant. Yeah. And if you overdose, it can cause problems with your heart. Mm-hmm. And so there is legitimate concern if anybody at any age is actually overdosing on this stuff. Now, I happen to think that, generally speaking, consumers have got to take a lot of responsibility. Clearly, one drink isn't going to land you in hospital. One drink isn't going to kill you. But if you overdose, you're going to have problems. But look, when I was actually watching the video, another little video came up on the side, in the little side menu. Woman dies after drinking too much water on a trekking trip. Okay, so should and you can yes. die from drinking too much water. You can. Mm-hmm. You can die from diving into a lake, mm-hmm. which is fed by melting ice. Mm-hmm. The temperature outside might be well over 100 degrees in America or 42 degrees here in Australia. You feel hot, you jump into icy water and you can have cardiac arrest. Mm-hmm. Who do you blame?
Yes.
So I think, it's quite a difficult issue, really. I think you need to know who you're marketing to. And I suspect that in reality, they are marketing to young people, the people they influence.
They know.
And it may be that there needs to be a little bit more education or a little bit more warning. I'm reluctant to sort of generally ban anything that might be bad for us.
Yeah.
Because that takes all responsibility away from the individual.
Yes, agreed.
And I'm not sure that harm is done by taking these kinds of drinks in moderation. Personally, I don't. You said you don't drink coffee. I do. I had 2 cups of coffee this morning before I did much else. I won't have any more for the rest of the day. Mm-hmm. So, I'd be a bit of a hypocrite if I went on a crusade against caffeine. I don't drink the so-called energy drinks, mm-hmm. Partly because their ingredients in total don't do anything for me, sort of psychologically, I guess.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly, if I was in a hurry and had an energy drink instead of drinking 2 cups of coffee, I'd get my caffeine fix faster.
And everything else.
Look, honestly, there are moral and ethical issues concerning basically any product at all. And
So
users need to
what
be
is
aware
what
and
is
they
the
need to be responsible.
yeah? So what is our responsibility as leaders that are influencing the people that we're leading or that are following us, or however you want to put it? How do we how much responsibility lies on us? Because as you said, like, we can't ban everything, and it should be, you are responsible for what you do and you consume. But we as leaders, what responsibility lies with us as to what we're promoting or influencing people to be able to consume or do? Not just
Well, I
consuming, but
suppose
doing as
you would
well.
have to say I'm not going to influence or encourage people to do anything I wouldn't do. So if I wouldn't be reckless with my body, then I wouldn't want to be influencing anybody else to be reckless with theirs. For example,
Yeah.
some people take more risks than others, I know. Look, it is a difficult area, but I think the most important thing for us as leaders to do is to make it very clear to people that they're responsible for their actions. They need to make their decisions and their choices. They need to educate themselves. Frankly, I don't take any notice of anything I see on social media, but that's partly, I suppose, because of my academic background. I'll go and look at the scholarly articles on an issue usually. In fact, I place very little confidence in anything I see in social media. So social media influences simply don't influence me. At least I don't think they do.
Yeah.
But as I said, see, look, I'm 3 times the age of most of the people who watch the social media influencers. So I've got a totally different view of the world
Yeah.
than they have. But look, I think one of the things we have to inculcate in people is, guess what? You are responsible for what you do. You are responsible for the outcomes.
Yeah.
There are some products that I believe, yeah, they probably do need to be regulated, particularly those that are addictive, and caffeine is one. So there might be a case for an investigation. There might be a case for the FDA to issue some sort of guidelines or even directives in terms of product labeling. But as a general principle, I'm not really in favour of banning products just because some people misuse them or abuse
No,
them.
but what's our responsibility as a leader, though?
I think,
Because you're saying, like, don't ban them, okay, and then we as consumers need to do it, do our own research. Yeah, that's great, but we as leaders that are influencing other people to do things, whether it be consume something, do something, act or behave a particular way, how do we make sure that we are influencing? Remember, at the start we said leadership is not just influence, it's about helping people improve and grow and actually seeing improvement. How do we make sure that we manage that as well?
oh, look, I think we have to do the best we can to make sure that what we say is the same thing as what we do. We lead by example.
Yeah. I
Look,
also
I think leadership's not just about, look, there's a teaching element in leadership too,
yes. Yeah.
So we have to be authentic, which means what we say has to match what we do. But what we say in part is the teaching role that we have
Yeah.
as leaders.
Actually, and that's exactly what I was just about to say is it's not just about making sure we do what we say and we walk the walk, but I think it is important that we teach in those moments as well, educate people, because what is good for me, I may consume a certain amount of food in a day, but that doesn't mean you should, because you have a different metabolism than me. You have a different daily routine. You have a different, I do different things. I go to the gym. I lift a particular weight. I shouldn't just tell you go and lift weight. I should, if I'm going to influence you around exercise, I should influence you around the education of it, being able to understand how to choose what is right, how to understand how to push yourself to the limits without pushing yourself too far, how to, and so yes, you're absolutely right. I think that that's the key in this message, that we as leaders really need to be careful that, yes, we need to walk the walk. Yes, we need to talk not just talk the talk, but we need to walk the walk as well. We need to practice what we preach. But make sure that we're educating people. Make sure that we are educating the people we're leading so that they can make the right decisions rather than them just doing what we say, because that's not leadership, that's dictatorship. What we should be doing as leaders is educating them, helping them understand how to make the right decisions, how to find the right information for them. And that's where I suppose that big difference between influence, that indirect leadership, and direct leadership, because we're actually directly then leading them of like, here, I want to teach you, I want to educate you, I want you to grow, rather than just, here, just do what I do, right? You can be successful if you just do what I do. No, that's not right, because we're all different. We all have different circumstances. But if I can teach you as much as I know, if I can help you understand the decisions that I've made and why I've made them, then maybe you can make similar healthy decisions for yourself. But talking about healthy decisions, let's move on to our next influencer that we are going to talk about. Let's talk about influencer Kai Cenat. Cenat. I don't know.
Yes, a lot of people have trouble pronouncing his name. I think it's Cenat, but but it's hard to know.
So he's a Twitch streamer, right? So on he's a Twitch streamer that he just recently did a giveaway for some, I think they were PlayStations or something like that. I'm not going to make myself sound as old as the person on this news story. He said some gaming machines, and he kept saying gaming machines. I'm not that old, right? But I'm pretty sure they were PS4s or 5s. I don't know, whatever they're up to.
I thought they were 6s. Is there a
PS? Is it? Okay,
I'm
maybe it
sure.
is then.
That's why people wanted them.
Oh, well, then that's the latest one. That's how I'm
yeah.
out of touch, but I'm not so out of touch that they are gaming machines. He definitely wasn't giving it away an Atari 2600. But he went into Times Square. Sorry, no, it was in Manhattan somewhere, where he offered to give away some PlayStations. Where are we? Where was it? Union Square. It was in Union Square. And at first it was a couple of hundred people that turned up. And then it just became thousands of people that turned up. Like, look at that. Like, there's just people rioting and climbing on cars, and the people were dancing on cars and smashing windows and everything like that. And he's been arrested for inciting violence. There's been a whole bunch of people that have been, 65 people that have been arrested and everything about this riot, right? Ugly scenes. I just have to say, as a bit of a side note, I am so sick of seeing these riots. I'm so sick of people just trying to find any excuse to go and be destructive. We're talking, before, we keep saying this is about, influence. Leadership is not just about influence, but what's best for the community, what's best for society. These riots and stuff are not good for anyone. I don't believe they're good for anyone. So it's a pity to see that's what's happening. But Dr. Rod, is it his fault?
Short answer, no.
Okay. Why not?
Do you know how lawless New York City is?
Yes.
People think they can do anything and that there won't be any consequences. And that guy, Ray Kelly, who was interviewed on the video clip, that was his view, actually, that all those people who have been arrested, they'll be released without charge. We'll see if that happens. I remember years and years ago, and this is a long time.
He was the former chief of police there or something?
Yeah, former chief of police. That's right. Ray Kelly, former chief of police. I remember years ago now, it's nearly 50 years, well, it actually is 50 years ago since I started my university degree. It's a long time ago. Believe it or not, rioting was happening then too.
Yeah.
And I remember reading a paper, which I can't remember the name of the author now, but the title was Rioting for Fun and Profit. And people just use any excuse. One, for young people especially, rioting's not bad fun, you know, because they're letting off steam and they
No
tend not to like
consequences.
authority. And especially
Yeah.
when you think there's no consequences, why not? So social media sort of propagates an event and people turn up. The other thing, and I don't think this was the case in this particular riot, but rioters often loot from shops. So throw in
Yes.
a shop window and off they go. That's the for-profit part of rioting. So look, I don't think he can be blamed. What he did, maybe it was unwise. Maybe he had no idea about how many people might be interested in winning a PlayStation. But I don't think, and I followed this story for a few days now, I don't think there's any evidence that he had this idea in his mind that he was going to draw thousands and thousands of people and start a riot. So I don't think he is to blame. I don't think we can blame him for it. But I do think it's a consequence of lawlessness in New York City. And I think anyone who's a little bit conservative probably has a lot of concerns about what's been happening in terms of law and order in New York City. And I think it's more a symptom of a lack of leadership in the area of law and order than it is in terms of a social media influencer.
So I agree with you that it's not his fault about the riot. However, he does have some responsibility. One of my past businesses that I ran was an events management company, and when we put on an event, we had to go through all of our safety regulations and go through our risk assessments and get all the right insurances and think of all the possible outcomes that could have happened. We went and scanned, had to get police permission and get private security and hire fences and put them up, and we had to do an event properly. It costs money and to do it properly and safely. And there were many events we had that attracted more people than expected, but we put the measures in place to prevent things from happening. Now, I think that this is where, yes, it's not his fault that a riot happened. People need to take responsibility for that and stop that. Just stop it. Seriously, just stop it. Just grow up. But anyway, I think that influencers or leaders do need to take responsibility. We as leaders need to take responsibility and understand that. I think that where I feel like we as a society have gone is we've gone in a way that is, there's so much easy access to things now, right? To do a podcast now, we just have a couple of cameras and $50 a month subscription to a software, and we can do it rather than having millions of dollars worth of equipment in a studio, right? The same as everything, it's just become more accessible for people to do things. So I think that because it's easier for people to do things, they've not taken the proper steps to be responsible about it as well. And I think that that's one big message we should, that influencers, just because you happen to just post things online and now you have 1 million followers and now you're an influencer and popular, I think that they've kind of negated the rite of passage or the apprenticeship or learning to, I didn't just step in and do my first big event. I helped out a bunch of events. I started small, it grew, I learned my mistakes, I built over time. I couldn't just turn up and just go, well, I'm going to throw an event for thousands of people in the middle of New York City. I couldn't do that because I had to grow to a stage where we had events where we had thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of people that, at some of the events I was involved in. But we grew to that and we learned along the way. I think that these leaders, they haven't. These influencers, they've just gotten influence. They haven't actually grown personally. And I think that they've lost that responsibility, that if you're, just because it's easy enough to just, you can just do a post and get a bunch of people there, that shouldn't negate the fact that you should take proper protocols, get proper permits, do your risk assessments, do all that sort of stuff. How can we, like, obviously not legislation, and I don't want to regulate influencers or anything like that, but where can influencers start growing up a little bit and taking a little bit of responsibility for themselves?
Well, I mean, I don't even know whether he would have seen this as an event or anybody would have seen it as an event.
But that's the problem. That's the problem. Like, you should have. And he had a PR company. It was a PR company that ran it for them. They're all apologizing now. They're like, sorry. But it's like, that's the problem. Why didn't they see that? Like, he's got millions of followers in the middle of New York City offering free gaming consoles. You're silly if you're not expecting that many people to turn.
Yeah, look, I take your point, but as you were working through that, I was thinking about a radio station with an outside broadcast van, and they're giving away prizes, and they'll appear in your suburb anytime without notice.
Yeah.
What kind of protocols did they go through? And it just seems to me this is the analog of that kind of thing. So I see your point. I've got to think it through a little bit, but and I suppose, we're talking about New York City, where there are a lot of people. It's a bit different to a radio station driving their outside broadcasting van to a corner in a suburb in Brisbane or on the Gold Coast or somewhere like that, or in Toowoomba, for that matter, where you might get a crowd of 50. Yeah, I do see your point. I do see your point.
No, you tell me. Like, let's talk about that, because you used to run a radio station.
Well, I did, yeah. Sort of.
Did you, not sort of, you ran a radio station, it was a community radio station, but still, did you guys ever do outside broadcast?
Yeah, we did. We did, but yes, we did.
And did you consider were there any conversations around safety or anything like that?
Listen, that was back in the days before you had to worry about things like that. So seriously, we planned on things like crowd control, and you're going to make sure there's a first aid post and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But event management is very different now to what it was, 30 years ago. Yeah. When I was involved in radio and doing outside activities and so on. Mm. But society has changed as well. Yeah. People don't take responsibility anymore. No. Back then, people took a fair degree of responsibility. So we've now got this. We've got to the point where I think it's the government's responsibility to keep us safe in every venue, in every circumstance. We don't take responsibility ourselves. And so now if you organise an event, there is a lot of paperwork. It's required by legislation, and there's hardly any responsibility placed upon anybody else other than the event organiser. It's crazy. We're in a crazy world. Mm. But I do take your point that he was perhaps naive, and maybe his PR people were a bit naive in believing that the offer was only going to attract maybe a couple of hundred people. And of course, that's all it did attract initially. Mm. Then it propagated. And I don't know to what extent he could have even been expected to anticipate something like that. Yeah. And I don't know that it would have happened like that in another city. Mm. New York's got some pretty serious problems with law and order. Yeah. That didn't exist a few years ago. But I do take your point, but I'm not quite fully persuaded. That's what I would say.
I just feel like I think there definitely needs to be someone responsible, right? If the influencer themselves aren't, then the problem is his PR company probably isn't just, how do I say this? they're probably not an experienced PR company. There's probably some kids that started up a digital marketing company because they knew how to do stuff, reached out to him and said, I'll help you grow and stuff like that. And I think that's where, because we've now lowered the bar for barriers of entry, that now anyone can do it, that I think we have lost a little bit of the experience, the wisdom that comes with some of the organizations that have been doing it for a while, that they've learnt, they follow their procedure, they've got all their safety regulations set up, that if it was an experienced PR company, they would have said, no way, we've got to organize police, we've got to organize this, we've got to organize, so I don't know. I think that I'm not saying he's at fault at all. I agree with you on that, but I also feel like I think that we, going back to us as leaders, I think we need to take some responsibility of like, are we running too fast for our own knowledge and experience? Are we growing too fast? Are we getting to a point where we could do with some wisdom around us to do things a little bit better? I feel like now I know I've already called myself an old man on this podcast, but I'm now going to say, us young people, we think that we can just do it without the previous generation. We think we can do it better. We think we can do it without you, and you guys just ruined everything for our generation. We're gonna ignore you. But I don't think there's wisdom in that. I think that there's wisdom in us joining hands and joining forces and learning from the old guard, so to speak. That yes, we've got some new things to bring, but we've also got some lessons to learn as well. And I'm sure if we could, as influencers, as young influencers that are coming up, let's not just try to be rebels for a cause and not just doing things anti-establishment. Let's not try to just be doing things our own way and trying to be against the old guard. There's some things that we can learn from the old guard as well, and there's some things that they can learn from us as well. Talking about new and old guard, taking responsibility. Our next topic. Now, this is a weird one, Dr. Rod. This is a weird one. Talking about influencers, this is a topic that came up, and I said, when we're talking about influencers, I can't not talk about this topic. AI influencers. And I think that we as leaders need to be warned about what's happening with AI. Like, obviously, AI. It's all the trend. It's all being spoken about, and ChatGPT and AI in this and AI in that, and AI. I'm using AI in a bunch of things, and it's helpful. And it, just found a new AI today that's going to help my. I can link to my video meetings, and it actually takes a full transcript, and then at the end I can ask it what were some of the key takeaways, and it gives a list of key takeaways. I also ask what was some of the assignments that were set during or tasks that need to be done by each individual, and it will do it. Like, AI is incredible, right? Like, this stuff is incredible. However, we need to be warned. There is a new trend when it comes to influencers, and it's called an AI influencer. There are some influencers on social media that are completely fake accounts. Sorry, they're real accounts, but run completely by AI. Now, I'm not saying that it's Skynet and they're actually running the technology or anything like that. No, it's humans that have set up the accounts, and they've got AI pretty much running the account. The model or the person on the account is completely AI generated. All the scripts, all the posts, everything is AI generated, and it's all done because AI knows exactly from our algorithms, from all of your consumption on social media. AI knows exactly what you want, and it will just keep feeding you, just like a drug. It'll keep feeding you. So there's all these influences, AI influences, just pretty much fake influences that are now becoming celebrities. Now they have brand endorsements and everything like that. And they're fake. It's just a computer, and we are eating it up. And I think that there has to be. I kind of want to talk to Dr. Rod about this today, because I'm like, there has to be something we learn from this. And I don't know what it is. There's a warning. It's dangerous. It's feeding. But what can we learn as leaders? Dr. Rod, genuinely, what can we learn from this? This seems unhealthy. It's quite obvious that it's unhealthy, but what can we learn as leaders? Is there a warning for us? It's concerning. I'm concerned.
Well, look, it really is a difficult area. And the article that you just threw up on the screen talks about increased suicide rates as a result of these AI influences.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? It's because some kind of perfection is being presented, which it is humanly impossible to obtain.
Yeah.
Look, I feel not necessarily to speak to leaders, but to speak to parents. You know what? Life happens when we're physically together.
Yes.
It doesn't happen on any screen.
Mm.
And I think, look, it's so difficult because children are exposed to screens from infant age, right?
Yep.
And I'm certainly not opposed to that, because if you're fairly discerning, you can find pretty good material for people who can't even yet speak.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we have to control it. And I think the other thing we have to do as parents and as leaders in our communities is to say, this stuff ain't real.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Most of what we see on social media is not real.
Mm-hmm.
And look, you only have to look at the faces of people on social media whom you know, and when you see them, man, their faces are just as imperfect as mine, right? Because they Photoshop themselves, and I don't, because I couldn't be bothered, but all sorts of things. So what you see on screen isn't actually reality. I think that's the most important thing to learn, if you like, is what you see on screen isn't reality.
Yep.
Reality, real life, is what happens day by day when we're interacting, as it were, in physical space with other people. And guess what? We're all imperfect.
Mm-hmm.
We're imperfect physically. We're imperfect emotionally. You know, we're, as the Bible teaches, we're all broken. That's one of the messages of Christianity. We're all broken, and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus is here to put the brokenness together again, to offer us wholeness. And it's true that we never get there. And I think it's because we're finite beings. We're not going to reach the infinite perfection that we see in most of the influences on screen, and certainly not in the AI influences. I think one other thing to bear in mind is this. Behind every AI, there's a human eye, right? Behind every piece of artificial intelligence, there is human intelligence.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist without human intelligence. And I think it's helpful for us to realize that behind every AI influencer is a purpose.
Yeah.
And maybe that purpose is simply to entertain. Maybe that purpose is to get us to buy something, but we should always remember someone is trying to manipulate us.
Yeah. That's
Now,
good.
I don't know how you get this message across to, a generation that's sort of brought up in an AI environment. Any of us who uses a smartphone, we're using AI all the time.
Yeah.
Any of us who uses a GPS system in our motor car, we're using AI. It's been with us now for quite some time. It's now more sophisticated, but AI cannot and can never have emotion.
Yeah.
So AI might, in some senses, imitate the
Mimics.
capacity of the human brain to think, but it can never have emotion.
Yeah.
It can never have volition. That is, it doesn't have free will in the way that human beings have free will. And I think at the end of the day, the message we have to get across is it's simply not real. If you build your reality on what you see on screen, you're actually getting the wrong understanding of reality. Even what we're doing today is not fully reality.
No.
Because I can't touch you. If you're emotionally down, I can't actually reach you. I can say soothing words, but I can't reach across and I cannot hug you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can do that with my wife when she comes home from work this afternoon. That is reality.
Yeah. I think that I think you touched on a good point at the start, and actually it's interesting that you said, I don't want to talk to leaders, I want to talk to parents. Well, actually, I think parents are actually the greatest leaders that are there.
Well, they are leaders, yes.
But I think you're right. In parents and anyone that's leading young people, I think there's a couple of lessons here. Is like, we need to be aware that this stuff is happening. But that's the first thing, and be aware that it's not going away, right? It's only going to become more and more and more. Think back when I was a kid, it was a Tamagotchi, babies or things you had to keep alive and stuff like that. It was a little bit of AI, and there was an attachment there. Every generation has its own version of that, but it's just becoming more and more prevalent. And I think that we as leaders, as parents, as pastors, as business leaders, as community leaders, we need to be aware that there is this trend to AI influences. There is more and more fake in this world. AI is now writing better letters, creating better posts, creating better social media. The AI is creating better and making it harder for us to feel like we can compete. And so I think that there's three things that I think that we should learn from this. First of all, is we need to be aware that it's happening, and we need to let people know that it's happening. Just teach people to accept that it is a part of life. Be aware of it. The second part is we need to learn to live with it. Right? We need to learn to live with the robots, because the robots are going to take us over eventually. Not really, but anyway, we need to learn to be able to live with it. For example, like I said before, use it. Use AI as much as you can so that you can have an advantage. Don't think that you need to compete with AI. No, AI is there as a tool to help you, and you need to teach the people around you how to best use AI as well. But the third, and this is an incredible point that Dr. Rod jumped on, was the fact that there is no substitution to human interaction. No substitution. We may be craving interaction. We may replace people with sex robots and companions, and people are marrying them, and AI, and we're following like people. But at the end, people are just craving interaction. That's all that they're doing. And nothing beats human interaction. So I think one of the greatest things we can do as leaders is provide human interaction. I know it's very easy to become a social media influencer and try to influence the world and try to spread our messages. And yes, that's what we're doing here. And I enjoy this, but I don't feel fulfilled from this. What I'm fulfilled with is being able to catch up with some of my youth from my church the other day. I just sat down with some and we just chatted for hours, human interaction, and that's where I thrived. I saw them come alive. And that is what we need to do as influencers, as leaders, make sure that we are still providing human interaction while trying to see how we can take advantage of the AI as well. So let's make a big shift, Dr. Rod. A massive, massive shift. There's a topic that in talking about influence, I wanted to figure out, like, hey, I want to include a Christian, story in this in this episode about influence. And one of the biggest things is there seems to be these people that are trying to influence a thing called Christian nationalism. Now, you and I have touched on this, Dr. Rod, over the past few episodes about, the integration between church and state and how, there's a lot of Western societies founded on Christian beliefs and where should we be drawing the line and things like that, right? But I saw this and I'm like, I want to talk to you about this because I actually want to probe you a little bit because I'll be honest, I don't quite understand it. I don't quite get it. Christian nationalism, is it a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a thing.
It's a thing.
Whether or not it's good or bad, I think really depends a lot on the individuals who become involved.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably better known as something that's happening in the United States,
mm-hmm.
but it's happening here in Australia, it's happening in the United Kingdom, it's happening in Canada, it's happening in many nations of the world now, particularly in the West, in the so-called Western nations, it's happening. And one of the reasons it's happening is that Christians feel they are now being marginalized. And I think there's a fair bit of evidence that that is true. So what are we talking about? Fundamentally, we're talking about the idea that America, or Australia for that matter, was founded as a Christian nation and therefore should stay that way. And as Christians see less and less influence of Christian thinking or Christian worldview on government and on society in general, they have a strong desire to see it reinstated. So that's what's driving this whole thrust, which is most apparent in America because that's where we get so much of our media, but it is happening in other countries as well. Now, I need to be upfront. I would probably be described as a Christian nationalist.
Okay.
Because my commitment to the idea that Christians ought and indeed have a right to be involved in every area of community life, including business and politics. And I actually belong to a political party in Australia, which really doesn't articulate that view, but really that's the view which is held by the leaders of that party, and I hold that view myself. Now, what Christian nationalism is not about imposing Christianity on everybody. That's a different theological position altogether. It's not about creating a theocracy.
Mm-hmm.
What it is about is defending the Christian worldview because historically it has been the basis for the development of Western civilization. In fact, the development of civilization or civil society in general. And there are those among us, myself included, who believe sincerely that Western nations as we know them today will crumble and disappear altogether unless we're able to reinstate some of the most important foundations of Western civilization, not the least of which is that every individual matters, and that is an inherently and distinctively Christian idea. It didn't exist before Christianity. Just have a look at the way the Greeks regarded the differences between slaves and free people, right? A different class altogether.
Yeah.
And they had different rights. In fact, they virtually had no rights if you were in the slave class. So Christianity introduced an unbelievably radical idea that because each one of us is created by and loved by God. We matter. Everybody matters. One of the things that's been tearing Western civilization apart is what we call cultural Marxism, the idea that people are defined by the class to which they belong. And broadly speaking, there's the victims and there's the oppressors. That's an inherently un-Christian idea, and Christians are fighting against that. And the fight's become quite strenuous in the United States, where there's been quite a dramatic shift to the left politically. And I mean, look, I even support ministries that in turn support Christian nationalism, not because they support Christian nationalism, but because I think they're good, solid Christian ministries. So
why is there like, the article, actually I forgot to show it before, but the article that that kind of spurred this on is an article is actually, kind of talking reasonably negatively against Christian nationalism, and they say it's heresy and all that sort of stuff. But like, why would they be against it?
Look, I don't agree with those who say it's heresy, but and they're not all clear about how they've arrived at their own doctrinal position. But if you're looking for a kind of doctrinal basis for being against Christian nationalism, I suggest that you have a look at the history of the Zealots. Right? Now, the Zealots were behind, or at least part of, the uprising against the Romans between AD 66 and AD 70, which many historians would argue led to the sacking of Jerusalem in AD 70 when the temple was totally destroyed. And there was another uprising in AD, might have been 73 or thereabouts. Now, the Zealots were politically active. They believed that the Messiah was going to overturn the earthly regime, so they were looking for a Messiah who would take on Rome and destroy Rome. Obviously, Jesus didn't do that. Some commentators say Jesus was openly against the Zealots. I don't know that there's strong biblical evidence of that. Really, the only mention of the Zealots is Simon the Zealot. And there was a specific incident to which Jesus reacted. But the gospel is not the gospel is much more than a political gospel. It's not about politics. If anything, it's about the upside down kingdom, not an earthly kingdom. It's an upside down kingdom where we preference other people, where our own desires are subjugated to the best interests of those around us.
And so with you saying that Christian, because I mean, obviously the tag Christian nationalism, it kind of, for me, kind of derives feelings of white supremacy and any form of like neo-Nazi, neo-nationalist, like the people that like want to dominate. That's kind of like the nationalism label is kind of added to a lot of people that are trying to dominate. And what you're saying is like, in its words, if we take it the same way that other people intend nationalism, they're trying to conquer and to control and to dominate, whereas the oxymoron, obviously, of this is the Christian belief, the Christian faith is the upside down kingdom, is the fact that we're here to serve people and to help people and see people grow, and that no one's better than anyone else. It's kind of an oxymoron to that. Christian nationalism is the fact that, yes, wanting to bring that complete structure of love, care, servanthood, the upside down, as you're saying, turning it upside down. Ultimately, you like the Lord's Prayer, bringing kingdom or heaven to earth. So you're saying that's That's kind of the core of this, would you say?
Well, when I think that's the core of the Christian project, if you like,
Yeah.
and has been since Jesus gave us the Great Commission. It's not just about evangelizing. It's about, we're supposed to be the hands and feet of Jesus serving the community.
Mm-hmm.
But if you listen to some of these people who might be labelled Christian nationalists, yeah, they're against much of what's happening in society because they see a society that's crumbling and they want to do something about it. Now, whether or not it's heretical, I think it has to depend on what an individual says and does. I don't think Christian nationalism on the whole is heretical at all, because we're not talking about, removing separation from state and church. And by that, separation from state and church is always about the political system not defining a particular religion as the state or the official religion.
Yeah, because
I think
when you say that, my mind goes to automatically to like the Shari law kind of issues. Like,
well, what about atheism? I mean,
yeah,
the ism which is being forced on people by governments in Western countries today is atheism. Now, if they're absolutely serious about separation of the state and church, stop forcing atheism down our throats.
Yeah.
Right? So I think Christian nationalism is about the right that Christians, as anyone else does, to fully participate in the political realm, but in others as well, but in the political realm. And look, part of the thinking is based on, many of us would have heard of the Seven Mountains philosophy, the idea that our societies can be thought of as comprising seven mountains, which are the broad areas of human interaction like government and education and the arts and the media and religion and so on. And look,
Business.
I
don't leave business out of that one.
Well, I shouldn't leave business out, obviously not, because most of the population engage in business in one way or another. But I believe that you can trace that thinking all the way back to Calvin, who talked about government and church as being separate spheres that were designed and created by God. Now, that's not to say that the church should have no involvement in politics. It's just what Calvin was saying is that God has created the church for a specific purpose and he's created government for a specific purpose. Separation of church and state guarantees, or it's there to protect each one from being, as it were, taken over by the other. But look, I think Christian nationalism is it's a clash of worldview more than anything else, where some are saying the worldview which is being promoted and propagated by governments is going to do great harm to people. And because people matter to God, they feel motivated to do something about it.
Yeah.
And at the moment, because, and it's moving into business as well, of course, but we see what's happening and we see it's going to do great damage to human beings. We feel committed to human flourishing, and that the political and social ideologies which are being promoted by governments are not healthy in terms of human flourishing. That's what motivates them. Now, when one of the things that is happening in America is that because of their strong belief that everybody has the right to be armed, and that one of the reasons, in fact, the prime reason why they do have the right to carry arms is if the government ever gets so far out of line, then the citizenry can actually take on the government.
Yeah.
And there are some in the so-called Christian nationalist movement who have been talking about taking up arms. But look, that's not the mainstream. And that is something which is pretty much confined to America. And as much as anything, it's cultural.
So what would you say would be your message to Christian leaders around Christian nationalism? And like,
Okay,
let me
well,
kind
yeah.
of I want to put some words in your mouth a little bit, because I kind of want to interpret like what I'm getting from you is like just what sums it up is really heaven on earth. That's our mission. That's what each of us individually can do. See how we can bring heaven to our little part of the earth. What would you suggest when it comes to Christian nationalism for Christian leaders in all spheres and on all mountains?
Well, it's not about theocracy. So in other words, it's not about developing a body of law which is based, say, on the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And it's not about imposing that on everybody. It's about entering into the democratic contest for ideas. And I mean,
But
to
still
say
having a moral grounding.
well, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, here we're talking about Christian worldview. So it's not about throwing everybody who disagrees with you in jail.
Yes.
You know, it's not about my own belief is I might get into a lot of trouble for saying this, but look,
Go on, say it. Trigger warning, everyone.
if somebody wants to change their sex, I'm not opposed to that. Right? I don't think that should be illegal. I'm not sure that it should be funded by the government, but because the reasons behind that desire are very complex.
Yes.
I'm not opposed to somebody being a homosexual. That doesn't mean I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Look, I have family members who are in long-term same-sex relationships. I love them. I don't condemn them because they don't hold the same worldview that I hold. Now, my love for them makes me pray for them, maintain interactions with them, but I'm not going to condemn them because they won't understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
So it's not about theocracy, but it is about recognizing the value that individuals have because they're made by and loved by God. That's why we want to protect the unborn. That's why we want to protect the elderly. We do believe that marriage between one man and one woman is the way that will best contribute positively to human flourishing. Right, that's the motivation.
Yeah.
And there's a contest going on for these ideas now. And yes, ultimately legislation will be predicated upon a worldview. It's at the moment, much of it is being predicated upon a worldview that most Christians wouldn't agree with. I don't think there's a lot of value in us Christians wanting to criminalize homosexuality, for example.
No.
I don't even know that we should be criminalizing abortion. Let me tell you why. One of the reasons why is this. One of the main reasons why women seek abortions is because their male partner has told them to. The incidence of domestic violence increases when a woman falls pregnant. Many of them seek an abortion because pregnancy has caused an increase in violence towards them. So my view is that if we Christians are going to make sure, if we're going to outlaw abortion totally, what are we going to do about domestic violence?
Yeah.
Right? So we can't look at these things simplistically. And Craig, we need a week to talk through these things, because when I say, I don't want to criminalize this, that, or the other, that's not saying I support it at all. But it is saying I don't think that's going to draw people towards Christ. I don't think that's going to lead people into salvation.
Yeah.
And so, and I don't believe that Christian nationalism in and of itself is about changing the status of Christians from being a marginalized group to making some other group a marginalized group. I mean, that's just kind of really implementing a kind of Marxism. We don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. People are defined by their individual characteristics, their individual value, their individual giftings, their individual effort, their individual outcomes, not defined by groups. And I think if I could, give any advice to those who are seen as leaders in the Christian nationalism movement, don't forget that our role is to bring, as Christians, our role is to bring heaven to earth. And fundamentally, what that would translate to is human flourishing. And so we believe, for example, that we should do everything we possibly can to avoid abortion, because abortion certainly doesn't allow one human being to flourish. There's no doubt about that. And then as a society, we lose everything that human being could contribute.
Yeah.
We lose their gifting. We lose their God-given destiny. We lose all that as a society. So there's a loss to society with every abortion. It's not just something that affects individuals, it affects society. In fact, the poet John Donne, who was a poet laureate, in his poem No Man is an Island, he actually originated that phrase, every death diminishes me. So if it's people who are dying through euthanasia or through abortion or through overdoses of drugs or through murder or anything like that, we're all diminished by it.
Yeah.
And we need to do everything we can to reduce death from all causes other than old age.
But I think that I want to kind of jump on this because it's actually, I mean, it's a dark point and it is sad, but it's true. And I think that there's something that does need to be said to this, is going back to that, what we're saying, the previous thing about human interaction. I think that we need to bring heaven to earth, definitely, but we can't forget that human interaction. We can't forget that people just need to feel loved. And I just feel like people aren't. And like you're saying, like, that's what leads to abortions, is because that woman may not feel like she can love that child, or that she's loved enough to be able, or supported enough to be able to support the child, or she'll be accused or looked down on, or whatever, or whatever the circumstances may be. Suicides and, all that sort of stuff. Like you're saying, is obviously there's no blanket answer. There's a lot of issues in this world, but I think it's one thing we can do: bring heaven to earth by love, but human interaction. Jesus went around touching people, meeting with people, spending time with people. He didn't just stand on a mountaintop and just talk to people from a distance. He went and met with people, hugged them, put his arm around people, gave them a hand. And I think that that's one thing that we can learn as Christians. Well, transitioning from that to our leadership lesson from Luke. We're talking about what Jesus did. Let's go to the Bible. The whole message talking about him, guiding towards him, talking about him. And I was just trying to look at, like, obviously there were no social media influencers. There was no Twitch streamers in Bible times. But I was just trying to think of this theme of influences, and we as leaders tend to, not leaders, but the generation of influencers tend to just be driving towards self-promotion. We spoke about, Logan Paul and KSI. It's great that they're using promotion to be able to, the influence that they have to be able to sell a drink, and unfortunately the influence that Kai had, the Twitch streamer, bit of self-promotion led to some riots. It's not that great, and so I think that we can. It wasn't exactly the theme of what we spoke about today, but I think that if we're talking about influencers, we need to be very careful that we're not aiming to be influencers because of self-promotion, that we're not trying to be influencers to build ourselves up. That's one thing that before Dr. Rod and I start this podcast, we always pray. And one of the most common themes we pray is, Lord, it's not about us. Like, this is not about, like, it's not our message we want to get out there. It's your message. It's his message that we're just here to be his servants, and we just pray that this impacts and positively influences some people. And so I just kind of want this to be a little bit of a warning for you as a leader if you're just trying to chase influence, if you're just trying to force self-promotion. And I want to lead you to Luke chapter 2 from verse 8. I'm not going to read the whole thing. However, the title of it is The Shepherds and the Angels. And I'm going to start from...
If you're going to talk about the shepherds, you better start in verse 8.
Okay, Pastor.
Oh, no, well, that's what
I'm gonna. I was gonna sum up, but let me just say, look, I'll be honest. I avoid reading from the passages for a number of reasons. One is because we don't necessarily have to read the whole thing to get the key. Sometimes it's just a verse we want to get it, and also. I have been diagnosed with dyslexia, and so I suffer from being able to read out loud, or read in general, and reading out loud is a challenge for me. So I try to skim and summarize, but I've been challenged. So with the strength of the Holy Spirit behind me, let me read this passage all through to you. And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone upon them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring good news of great joy that there will be that will be for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is Christ, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloth and lying in a manger." Suddenly, a great company of heavenly hosts appeared with the angel, praising God, saying, "Glory to God to the highest, and on earth peace to men of whom his favor rests." When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby laying there. I suppose what I wanted to get at with this passage was talking about influences and self-promotion. Could you imagine if you had a sky full of angels promoting you and your business, promoting your church, your ministry, promoting like imagine that, right? And I like to really look meta at some of these things, and the way that I look at that, I think about okay, who was being promoted at that time? Well, it was Jesus. And what was Jesus doing? Well, he was just humbly, doing his purpose. That's all he was doing. He was humbly doing his purpose. He turned up on earth as a human, as a baby, went through all of that journey for us. And I just think it's incredible that when we humbly do our purpose, God will find a way to promote us. Now, I'm not saying ignore marketing. I shouldn't, because half of my business is I do digital marketing for clients. So definitely digital marketing and marketing is important. You have to do marketing. But there's a difference between marketing and doing things responsibly and self-promotion. I just kind of feel like there is this borderline that we as leaders, and especially in this realm of influencers, we need to be very careful that we're not in the game of self-promotion. Yes, share your ideas. Yes, use good business practices. Yes, do marketing. Yes, do all those sorts of things. But I think the key that we need to focus on is make sure that we are following our mission. Make sure that we are following our purpose. Make sure you're doing what God has called you to do with humility, not doing the self-promotion, and just trust that God will do the promotion for you. Maybe it won't be a billboard of angels in the sky, but God will bring the right clients to you. Still got to do marketing, still got to run a good business, still got to do all the good business practices, but don't be focused on self-promotion, that pride stuff. Don't feel like you need to overinflate yourself and put on a facade and think like none of that. Just do what God has called you to and trust that God will bring the people. For example, with this podcast, Dr. Rod and I we're not claiming to be the experts. We're just sharing from our experience and stories and just doing what we believe God has called us. This is something that we believe God has called us to do, this podcast. And so we're doing it humbly, not many viewers, we're only small. However, I'm started to get my digital marketing team to start doing some work in the background. And in the last week, we've seen a massive increase in viewership of just a couple of the ones that they've started working on. There's wisdom in that. But I'm not sitting here promoting ourselves and saying we're amazing and saying, I'm not, it's not about that. We're just sharing our thoughts, doing our mission, humbly doing our mission, and seeing how God can do the rest. But you know what? It's our job to partner with God. Dr. Rod, what did you get from that passage?
Quite a few things. It appears from that passage that the shepherds knew the truth. They knew who Jesus was. But it also appears that they didn't go and boast that they were the first people to see him. So you made the point, of course, that leadership isn't about self-promotion. These shepherds had surely discovered something that was literally world-changing. They went back to their job. They were praising the Lord, all right, but they didn't claim any particular privilege from what they had seen. In fact, their attention was more on Jesus than it was on themselves. The other thing was, it's interesting that one of the thoughts that went through my mind as you read, and you actually read beautifully, by the way.
Thank you. There's a couple of things. It's because the way Bible's laid out, it does make it a little bit easier. And I know the story, and I've read it a bunch of times in the last few days, so it does make it a little bit easier.
The other thing that went through my mind was that, let's say we did a bit of a survey and we asked people, now, if you were God, how would you have appeared to humankind? Right?
Yep.
Thunder, lightning. But God chose, and we have to remember Jesus was God, right? Emmanuel, God with us, not a separate person. He was not created by God because he existed just as God is. So Jesus is part of the Godhead. The ancients described God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Ghost, three persons but one substance. All right, so there's a oneness there. But God chose to appear in the form of a human being. How many of us, seeing that the world was in such a terrible state, would have chosen to appear?
Yeah.
Bethlehem was a village of maybe, I think, about 300 people. Wasn't even a city. It wasn't of particular note either. He was born probably not in a stable, but probably in the ground floor of a house. It was pretty common for homes They were mainly made of stone. I mean, it's even doubtful that Joseph was a carpenter. He's more likely a stonemason, but that doesn't really matter. The house he was born in probably belonged to relatives of Joseph. It was probably 2 stories with the ground floor devoted primarily to the housing of livestock. It was wintertime. The livestock were kept indoors because the hot air would rise and warm the living quarters above, and then there'd be a flat roof on top, which was used a lot in the summertime, which was
So
hot.
the heat would rise up to keep them warm, but
There'd be
the
a bit of smell
aroma
as well.
would also
Yeah,
rise
sure,
up.
sure. So he was probably born in a feeding trough. That's pretty humble. That's pretty humble. And of course, even his brother or half brother James didn't recognize who he was. It wasn't until after the resurrection that
Yep.
James, his own half brother, recognized that he was in fact the Messiah, and James went on to become one of the leaders in the church. So I think there's a great lesson for leadership here. Not turn yourself into a baby, but just be humble and let God do the lifting up. And this is hard.
Yep.
Honestly, look, I'll tell a bit of a story about myself here. I'm almost 67 years of age. It won't be too long before I have my birthday. And, I pray and meditate and read the Bible a bit, probably not as much as I should and as much as many do. But it was about a year ago when I just felt a conviction from the Lord. We Pentecostals say, I heard from God, or God spoke to me. But it's a kind of conviction that wells up from deep within. The conviction was this: why am I still seeking identity? And I thought, my goodness, I thought I'd resolved that issue a long time ago, because I teach, as you know, I'm a pastor. I teach that our identity is determined by our relationship with Jesus Christ. That's what gives us identity. And yet, here am I being convicted of the fact that I still hadn't yet fully internalized that teaching.
Yeah.
Because I'm still looking for recognition. We had a chat before we started our podcast today about the number of people who had watched our videos, and I'm thinking, oh, that's good. That's really good.
Yeah.
And there's such a temptation to think, I want to become better known. I want to become better known. And yet that's un-Christian. It's ungodly.
Yeah.
There's
There's nothing wrong to wish growth like that. There's nothing wrong with that, because like for me, it's like I want to have more viewers, not for us to be more famous, but I want us to have more viewers because I believe that God's given us a message, and I want to help more people.
That's right, but we just have to fight against that carnality that says, I want to see my name up in lights.
Yep.
I want to see more likes. I want to see positive comments. I want to, I want to monetize our channel. I want to do this. I want to do that. We have to fight it. I certainly know I have to fight it because there's something in me that says I want to be important.
Yeah.
But where I find that importance, it's in relationship in my family. If I can just take one more moment as a dad, as a kid, I wanted to be a superhero. We didn't have the same kind of superhero movies. There used to be a TV program. I can't actually remember the name of it now, but the hero was on a horse, and the hero always won the heart of the lady. And I wanted to be like that.
Yeah.
And there's always a part of me. There's still a part of me. I want to be the hero, but I've been a hero. Let me tell you, I was a hero to my 2 children. When they were little girls, when they were toddlers, preschoolers, every time I came home from work, I was the world's greatest hero. I've been the world's greatest hero, Craig. I was the world's greatest hero to my 2 little girls.
Yeah.
And I realized then, that's what really satisfies the craving.
Yeah, because you're following your purpose. Like at that time, your purpose is to be a father.
Well, I still am.
still,
And
and a grandfather.
I'm still a tiny hero to my daughters.
But
They've got
think,
husbands now who
Yes.
are their major heroes.
yeah, I think that you're just emphasizing the point of like when we are actually following our purpose rather than trying to chase self-promotion, when we are just pursuing our purpose, that's where fulfillment happens. That's where God can, we do our part. It doesn't mean we just sit back and go, well, God will do it all. No. We still need to do our part. Still need to do some marketing. We need to make sure our thumbnails are right. We need to make sure our captions are right. We can still improve. We can be better, but it's to pursue our purpose and to see the fulfillment of our purpose, not to see self-promotion. I think that's one thing that I kind of want to encourage people today is that God, don't worry about self-promotion. Worry about your purpose. Focus on your purpose, not the self-promotion, because that's when you do your part and allow God to do his part. When we are doing self-promotion, I feel like that's taking faith away from what God has put in us. And we feeling like, well, I need to do it. I need to be in charge of this. I need to fluff up myself and I need to exaggerate things and I need to prove how good I am for my own benefit. That's you being in the place of God. But when we as leaders can do our part, use the skills that God's given us, use the experience that God's given us, use the skills of the people around us, team up with people, make sure we're pursuing our purpose. And through that is how then God can add his miraculous power to it to help expand the impact, the influence while we're pursuing purpose. Dr. Rod, thank you so much once again, and thank you for watching, and thank you for everyone who's been watching these and commenting and giving us thumbs up and stuff. We really appreciate it. We are enjoying seeing the growth of this. It is rewarding to think that, the hard work that we're putting in, it's, some people are appreciating it. So, if you want to see more of this sort of stuff, consider subscribing to the channel. Faith-based leadership content is what it's all about. We want to help you discover your purpose and become a better leader through your purpose. We're on a mission to eradicate poor leadership from this planet. So thank you for watching. I hope this has been helpful for you. Drop a comment below, give us a thumbs up, do all those things. Dr. Rod, thank you once again for your wisdom and your time.
Well, thank you for allowing me to join you, Craig. I really do appreciate it, and I enjoy it.
Me too. You make me a better person. You are my leader, and you talk about seeing people improve and grow around you, flourish. You definitely make me flourish. So thank you, and bless you all, and we will see you next week.